We can be our own worst critics. This is a universal truth that applies to so many contexts, pretty much to a lot of people. But for some reason, when it comes to editing our own papers or our own emails or things that we wrote, it can be really hard to find errors or things to fix. We think, it's fine. I like it the way it is. I don't even know where to start. In fact, these are excuses that I hear all the time from my students. Sometimes they tell me, they're like, I stared at it for 17 hours and I didn't find anything. And then we look at it together and I'm like, yeah, but what about in your first sentence? There's like 5 errors. Do you know what I'm talking about? Yeah, you do. Otherwise, you probably wouldn't be watching this video. So I have 6 quirky and simple tips. They are quirky and they are simple, but they really work for editing your own essays or emails or significant things that you wrote. But before we begin, I would love for you to like this video and subscribe, click the notification bell, and then also follow me over on Instagram for daily inspiration and behind the scenes stuff. So I am Katie Azevedo. I started SchoolHabits.com. I'm an executive function coach and I have tutored thousands of students one-on-one in study skills, college application essays, SAT, ACT, and writing. So that means I have seen a lot, and I have seen a lot of students not know how to edit their papers. Why? Honestly, just a lot of us just haven't been taught. That's like the main reason. They've been taught how to write, but not how to edit, and those are 2 completely different processes. Another reason could be that you've just been staring at it too long, and the longer we work on something without taking a break, the more things start to blur together. Or sometimes we've been working on a paper for so long that we lost track of the big argument and we're too hyper-focused on the components of the essay. So things like, what's my word count? How many pages is this? Is this enough paragraphs? Is this what my teacher's looking for? And then we just actually lost track of what we were writing. So strategy number 1, drastically reformat the paper. This one is my favorite. So assuming you're typing your essay, write the essay, and then for the editing process, go in and change the font, the size, the font style, perhaps the color. So make your paper look visually different, and then print it out if you can. If you don't have a printer, you can edit, of course, right on the computer screen, okay? But I do recommend for the editing process, if you can, print out your paper and review it on paper, because again, that makes your essay look different, because it looks different when it's on paper than it is on screen. But just changing what your essay looks like can make errors, things that were there the whole time, look that much more obvious. Okay, number 2, read your paper aloud, preferably to somebody else. If you don't have somebody else there, just read it out loud. You want to be able to hear your voice, so don't read it aloud in your head. That doesn't count. So when you read your essay aloud, you're, first of all, slowing yourself down, because we read slower externally than we do internally. So when you read slower, chances are you're going to catch errors that are there. Second, when you're reading your paper out loud, you're engaging the auditory part of your brain. So that is another way to give yourself another chance of finding errors that are wrong with your paper, other than just looking at the screen, which is relying just on, does my paper look right? But when you hear it, you're saying, does my paper sound right? Now, this is tip 2A, I guess, and then tip 2B would actually be to have someone read your paper to you, because hearing your essay in someone else's voice sometimes is all we need to give ourselves permission to become more critical of the essay. So when we hear someone else read it, we're like, oh, well, that doesn't sound good. Versus if we read it ourselves, we're like, I sound good. You know what I mean? It's like we're less defensive when somebody else reads it. Number 3, use a checklist. Hopefully your teacher gives you one. If they do, it's not just for fun and games. Use the checklist. If you don't have a checklist from your teacher, look in the description box of this video and there's a free download, a link to a free download for the one that I created. If you are starting from scratch, then absolutely that's a great place to go. But even if you think you're at the point where you're like, I don't need a checklist, I know how to write, I can just go through the things in my head, don't rely on that. Because obviously if you're watching a video on how to edit an essay, editing an essay is a challenge for you. So you want to use all the tools you possibly can. So for your checklist, you want to go through, literally go through each item on your checklist, like capitalization, punctuation, citations, subject-verb agreement, fragments, run-on sentences. And if I rattle off something like subject-verb agreement right now, and you're like, what is that? Google it. Is that not what Google is for? Like, figure out what these things are, because if you don't know what they are, you will never be able to find them or find the errors in those categories. Okay, number 4, put the paper away for 24 hours. Obviously, you cannot do this if you have procrastinated and your paper's due in like 20 minutes. But when you put the paper away for 24 hours, then you sort of let things settle. You almost to a degree forget what you wrote so that when you come back to it the next day, you're seeing it with a fresh set of eyes. Versus if you're just like spending so long writing it and then going straight into the editing process, a lot of what you're looking at is kind of like what you've memorized, what's on the page, but isn't necessarily what is actually on the page. So you want to disrupt your memory of what you wrote, and you want to do that over like 24 hours or at least overnight. Number 5 is a little bit out of the box, and it works if you are writing your typical English paper where you have an intro that has a thesis and then body paragraphs that support your thesis. So the strategy is take your introduction paragraph and hypothetically put it before each body paragraph and check to see it makes sense. So normally when you go back and you read your essay to edit it, you would read your intro and then you would read your body paragraph, your first one, which should directly be able to flow from your introduction. But this strategy, you would do that, but then you would go back and read your intro and then read your second body paragraph. You'd skip your first body paragraph to see if your introduction flows perfectly into your second body paragraph. And you do that for your third, your fourth, your fifth, however many body paragraphs you have. Because if you're following a structured essay where it's like your classic introduction thesis with supportive arguments underneath it, your introduction should be able to fit right on top of each body paragraph and make logical, cohesive, sequential sense. If it doesn't, then go back and fix something. So tip number 6 is read from the bottom up. And I know that's weird, but I'm gonna unpack that. So when you read from the top to the bottom, you're looking at your sequence and how the paragraphs connect to each other, and that's great. And we need to do that. That was strategy number 5. But you also need to make sure that each paragraph as a standalone paragraph is well developed and good by itself, not in connection to the other paragraphs of your essay. So like you read each paragraph from the bottom up. So you read your conclusion, you look just at that. Is it good? Do you repeat your thesis? Do you restate your arguments? Do you have your conclusion-y things in there? Good. Now go up to the next paragraph right before that. Does it have a claim? Does it have evidence? Does it have a conclusion sentence? Does it have enough analysis? And you're looking at each isolated paragraph by itself, because you're not going to have a good essay if it flows, but each paragraph is weird. And you're also not going to have an essay if each paragraph is beautiful, but it doesn't flow. So you need to edit for both. Now, knowing how to edit an essay takes time, it takes some tweaking. Some people like to write and edit at the same time. I don't suggest that. I suggest you write your essay as step 1, and then you edit it as step 2, because writing your essay involves more of the creative process, whereas editing the essay involves more of an objective lens. So it's kind of 2 different parts of the brain if you think about it, and in my opinion, I think it's difficult to do at the same time. Now, if you're looking for a place to start, you don't need to just do all 6 of these tips at once, but I would start with tip number 1, which is drastically reformatting your essay, and then also number 2, which is reading it out loud and have somebody read it out loud to you. Those 2 right there can make a huge dent in the quality of your final product, and then when you feel comfortable with those, then add in a 3rd tip, a 4th tip, 5th tip, all the way to the end. And then you'll have a complete toolbox. If you try these and they work, let me know in the comments below, or if you have your own strategies that work, put those in the comments below too. And I just love knowing like what you guys are using too. So thanks for watching. I hope it hit, I hope it hits. No, I hope nothing hits you. I hope these help, and don't forget to like and subscribe, and see you in my next video.